welcome to this presentation about doing business in South Africa. My name is Jennifer Stenmark and I will guide you through this presentation. South Africa is like borders with Botswana, Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, Eswatini, and Zimbabwe by land. John Hemingway once said, "If I ever have seen magic, it has been in Africa." Africa is really an interesting continent for businesses that want to go abroad and grow their businesses. In this presentation, I will explain you why you should go to South Africa and not any other. Here are the contents of the presentation. Let's start with the business context. So South Africa is a constitutional democratic republic with federal elements. Since the beginning of the 1990s, South Africa has gone from a system where the majority of the country's population lacked the right to vote to becoming a fully fledged democracy with a constitution that guarantees human rights and emphasizes equality before the law. Since the first democratic election in 1994, the formally banned African National Congress, with Nelson Mandela ahead, which led the back struggle against the apartheid system, has been ruling. And here we also see Nelson Mandela to the left and Cyril Ramaphosa to the right, which is the actual president of the country. So South Africa's social context. It has a population growth among the lowest in Africa. It decreased the infant litters and higher mortality due to AIDS come into play. Today, just over 2 children are born per woman and declined from 6 children per woman in 1960s. The blacks make up about 80% of South Africa's population and belong to one of the Bantu peoples. The Zulu people are the biggest. Xhosa is the second largest ethnic group. Just over half of the country's 4.6 million whites are Africans, formerly called Boers. The blacks usually speak Bantu languages, but English is the first language for just under a tenth of the population. The language of Afrikaans is Afrikaans, which has its roots in the 17th century Dutch. The apartheid system was present before Nelson Mandela made a still gap between different races in Africa. And the Black Economic Empowerment Policy, which was created for forcing companies to hire black people in the workforce. But unfortunately, there's still no real middle class in South Africa. We see 60 million people, and almost 20% of them are living under poverty headcount ratio. Quite small population growth of 1%, a life expectancy of 64% due to that a lot of children die when giving birth, and AIDS. Economic factors. GDP per capita is around 6.994 million USD per person. GDP growth about 5% annually. Very high unemployment rate of 33.6%. Inflation fairly high of 4.6. Foreign direct investment 0.9, and a trade in percent of GDP is about 56%. So trade is very important for South Africa. So if we move on to the sectoral structure, South Africa's economy has traditionally been rooted in mineral resources and favorably agricultural conditions. Since the early 1990s, economic growth has been driven mainly by the tertiary sector, which includes wholesale and retail trade, tourism, and communication. Now it is turning into a knowledge-based economy, which we can see that 26.8 of the sectorial structure is professional and financial services. So some recent key industries for your new business in South Africa could be, for example, agro-processing, business process outsourcing, IT services, capital transport equipment, metals, electrical machinery, and apparatus. Yeah, you see, and so on here in this list. So exports and imports. Exports are higher than imports, so it's a surplus, which is good. The top exports you can see up here. Gems, precious metals is the biggest one, about 28.2% of the total exports. And the imports is mineral fuels, including oil, 16.5% of the total imports. Environmental issues in South Africa: pollution, lack of energy, and deforestation. Consumers in South Africa care about sustainable options, but they don't want to and sometimes can't afford to increase their spend on them. It is a coal-dominated country with a mining industry. However, the government approved its integrated resource plan in the late 2019, which reduced the role of coal and increases the adoption of renewables and gas. South Africa, along with much of Africa, actually is a very well-endowed continent with solar and wind resources. So it's therefore highly likely that renewables will always be producing power, because when the sun sets, we still have wind. So in the future, renewable resources will be a very dominant industry here. So some opportunities and threats. A democracy, developed market in Africa, a gateway for companies that want to operate in the sub-Saharan African markets, service-based industry opportunities, future country for renewable energies, and some threats. High unemployment, poverty, lack of training. And despite of the black economic empowerment, we still cannot see a middle class in the country. It's a competitive market, and corruption and bribe is very common. So yeah. And so let's move on to doing business. Starting a business, it has a very business enabling environment. You have to start a Spanish subsidiary. It's important to think about the business visa as well as choose the right company structure. If you choose the right one, it will be easier to repatriate the money back to Spain. So very important. You can see that starting a business, it's a little bit easier, well, less procedures than a normal sub-Saharan Africa. So here you can see the 7 procedures to start a company. Getting credit. It scores out 60 out of 100, so it ranks 80 on this. Well, the strength of legal rights is quite low, as in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. Depth of credit information, very good in comparison with the rest of Africa. Credit register coverage, almost nothing, well, nothing. Expatriate procedures and management, so Spanish citizens will need a general working visa to come here. You can get it as well as when you are contracted by or hired by the company. So requirements to open a bank account is passport, work visa, proof of address, 3 months of bank statement. Renting an apartment is cheaper. There are many options, 3-bedroom apartments or villas. Medical healthcare, so high standards, likely to Europe. But anyway, it's very much recommended to opt for private healthcare, as it simply is better and there is less waiting time. Paying taxes, so much less tax payments per year than in the rest of Africa. Also take less hours. Total tax contribution is 29.2%, so much lower. And the post-filling index is a little bit higher than the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. Trading across borders. Here we can see some of the costs and the times. I will not dig into deep detail here. Let's move on to the cultural context. If we look at the Hofstede dimensions, we can see that in South Africa it's a less power-distant country, so you don't expect a dominant boss. Individualism, it's more individualistic than Spain, so it's not very collectivistic and the person before the group. Masculinity is more masculine, so people expect, well, they want higher wages, more workload instead of free time and family time. They are less uncertainty avoidant than Spain, so they don't need exact instructions and be able to foresee in the future. Long-term orientation, they are more short-term oriented, so they want direct benefits instead of long-term. Indulgence, they are very indulgent, so they express their feelings more than Spaniards do, maybe. How to negotiate, important to build trusting and lasting relationships, but maybe not the most important for as a precondition for initial business interactions. It's important to have a local contact, but it's not necessary to do business, but can make it easier. So negotiations in the country can be conducted by individuals or in teams of negotiators. It's important to have clear roles in the team. Negotiation in South Africa depends on your culture, well, the counterpart's cultural background. So, and in all of the groups, the buyer is the superior position, so the deal should be responsible to reach agreement. South Africans try to reach win-win in all the negotiations, which is good. Some do's and don'ts. Informal conversation with South African partner is good for making a personal contact. Adjust your introduction to the racial background of your business partner. You don't have to dress super formal, but a coat and a tie are customary. And some don'ts. Do not pressure white South Africans into a deal. They are sensitive. Don't want to be exploited by foreigners. Do not comment political or social situation. And do not give any presents to business partners, as it can be seen as bribe. Final recommendations. Get to know the South African market well before going there. Choose the right legal entity for making business easier. Create great local business relationships to integrate. So